because he's one of the most fascinating people in the history of boxing. He's kind enough to join us right now via the magic of Zoom to talk about it. Hello, Andre. How are you?
Brother, good to see you. Good to be back on. How you doing?
Yes, it is great to see you as always, and thank you for the time. Why is it, Andre, that we are learning so much more about you now when there's obviously money to be made from these things, but you know, in the promotional game, you want to learn about someone as they're coming up in the boxing ranks and the fighting ranks, and you were such a closed book for all those years, and now we're just learning everything about you post-fighting. Why is it now that this is happening?
Well, I think, there's a time and a place for everything. And I think that, when I first burst onto the world scene in 2004, man, I'm fresh out of the streets. I had just given my life to God. I'm a young father and a young, married man. I'm trying to figure life out. And I didn't think it was right to sort of lead with the horror stories and, the things that, family history and all these different things. And I sort of stayed on that trajectory throughout the course of my career. And then you start to realize, how this stuff is, Ariel, like, everything isn't for everybody. And certain media members, man, they're objective. They do a great job. And, you can respect them and you know that what you say is going to be printed or refurbished, the right way. But then there's a lot of guys out there you cannot trust with that. This story is sacred to me. I knew I was going to tell it one day, but I wanted it to be told right. And now is the right time.
Do you feel like if you were more open with your story to the world, to the media throughout your fighting career, that you would have made more money?
It's possible. I mean, who's to say, But what I did see was a lot of guys tell their whole life story, and sometimes nothing happens because of it. You just know more about the person. So I've always been a little bit different. And, I tried to be very sensitive about these things. Like, this is my life story. This is my family story. And it wasn't until, several years ago that I got my mother's blessing to tell that story. This is a woman that's been through a lot. And just because I'm promoting a fight, that's not a good reason for me to go ahead and air everything out. My father's passed. It took me a long time to come to peace with, can I tell his story? And then how do I tell his story? So there's a lot of layers that don't make this process very simple. It's not as easy as just, oh, you should have told it earlier. It's, hey, I wasn't ready. Mom wasn't ready. Dad's not here. And then how do you tell it?
Do you feel comfortable now? It's all out there, right? The doc is out there. The book is out there. How do you feel about the fact that the world knows so much more about you now?
It's a bit strange, but it's it's also gratifying. And, I think hearing the feedback and the testimonies and people relating and, chiming in and being encouraged and being inspired, that's the part that makes it all worth it for me. I don't think, doing these kind of things will ever be comfortable for me. Like I said, the era I was raised in the 80s, we just didn't do stuff like this. It's a totally different world. But I see the benefit and the fruit that we're bearing from going through this process makes it all worth it.
I told you that I loved the doc. It was great. And we learned so much about you there. If someone watched that and hasn't had a chance to get the book yet, why should they get the book? Like, if they feel like they know the Andre Ward story, what are they going to learn in this? And you don't have to obviously, tell everything right here and now, but like, why is this a compliment to the film as opposed to just like a duplicate of what we learned in the film?
For sure. No, and the doc and the book, like you can't necessarily predict that it's going to come out like that, but I'm happy it did because the doc was, we touched on certain things sort of superficially. You got 90 some odd minutes to try to get it done. We lived in certain areas like injury and, Kovalev 1, Kovalev 2, a little bit longer, but life history, personal struggle, and the depth in which that I got to with using drugs, experimenting with drugs, alcohol, trying to numb, depression and anxiety, not even really knowing what those things were. But in hindsight, that's what I was doing, taking you down that dark road and then helping you understand how I came out of it. That's what the book is about. And then understanding those around me, mom, dad, family members, and overcoming those generational curses and the things that really I wasn't supposed to make it out of. So the doc was amazing for what it was worth. But the book takes you a lot deeper, and it just helps you live in certain moments a lot longer and introduces new scenes that you've never heard before.
How long ago were you using drugs and alcohol to numb anxiety, depression, and things like that?
Yeah, this is 16, 17, 18. And, this was a very dark period for me because, I've been raised, as this phenom to become a gold medalist and a world champion. And it sounds crazy to the average person to talk about those kind of things when you're that young, but that was a realistic goal for us. We used to count on our hands, hey, 9 years, 8 years, 7 years. And every day I worked toward that goal. I didn't go hang out with my friends after school. I came home to do homework, and then I was off to the gym. So very regimented lifestyle. Then I started seeing the struggles that my dad had. And you start to build up resentment. You start to understand that, hey, that was a lie. You said that you weren't high and it was just this, but it really was this. And then here comes the resentment. Here comes the rebellion. And I just got to a point where I didn't care about boxing. I was over. I didn't want to box. I didn't care about the Olympics. In fact, I said that, and I talk about this in the book. But I'm grateful for Virgil not giving up on me. I'm grateful for my mother as she turned the corner in her personal life, chasing me down, calling me, son, you got to stop. I don't know what you're doing, but you got to stop. I've been praying for you, and I just feel like something's off. All those things that irritated me, things that I was running from, but things that I needed. And if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be here talking to you right now.
What was the turning point? How did you get back on the right path?
Man, it was just, I like to say that God was giving me a whooping. I was getting whooped. And, you know, things were sort of getting predicted, and they were happening. Birds would tell me, you're not going to get away with anything. Like, that's fine if you don't want to box, but you can't live this way. And he would always say, God has his hand on you. I didn't fully understand that. And in fact, I resented that, because at this time period between 2001-ish and 2003, I lost my father during that time. So I'm not only starting to experiment with drugs and alcohol, but now I lost the closest person to my life, and I don't have answers. So I don't want anything to do with God. I don't want anything to do with boxing. And he just continued to sort of predict what was going to happen to me, and then it would happen. Man, you're going to get in trouble if you keep. Then it would happen, and those things were just speaking to me, and I just felt God sort of closing in on me, and it just got to a point one summer where I just threw my hands up. I literally had just had enough, and I began to call out and ask for forgiveness and ask for a second chance.
The title of the book is called "Killing the Image," which I think is a really interesting title, especially considering your backstory. Why did you pick that?
Well, it sort of chose me. You know, I was just talking to my pastor one day, and we're just talking about, mentorship and talking to the young guys. I was like, man, sometimes these guys don't understand it. Like, I've been there already. I've done what they've done, and probably worse. He's like, Dre, you got to kill the image. And I was like, what do you mean? He said, no, who you are is real, but it's just not who you've always been. It's okay to tell that story. And even though I had given my life to God several years earlier, and even though I hadn't been walking that life for a long time, there's still a lot of shame that I had to overcome to have the confidence to tell my story. Part of it was media. Hey, this isn't for y'all. I'm going to tell my story one day. But some of it was shame. And I didn't even know it was shame, because you know how it is. You look back on those younger years and you're like, dude, you idiot. Like, what were you doing? Like, how could you have lived like that? And I had to overcome that shame. And the only way I was going to overcome it was to open my mouth and begin to tell it. And so my pastor calls it telling on yourself, speaking about these things openly. And whatever the response is, that has nothing to do with me. But I got to get this out so I can fully heal.
So as I've said, in the last few months, you've been very busy, and it's so great to learn so much about one of the true icons of this game. And this has been such a great year for boxing, but there's been one component to me that has been somewhat depressing, and that's from like a media standpoint, and I'll explain why. I believe it was in July, a great week of boxing. Spence Crawford on the Saturday, just a few days prior, it's Naoya Inoue against Stephen Fulton in Japan. And I believe you were calling that fight for ESPN, middle of the night over there, and it was great. And then I believe it was the next day, correct me if I'm wrong, if my timeline is wrong, you dropped this graphic on us like, I'm out, peace. There was no talks of you like potentially leaving. It was just like a great card. Inoue steals the show, all that. And then Andre Ward, one of the best, if not the best active analyst in the game right now, I truly believe that, as far as like former fighter turned TV analyst, is just out. What the hell happened? Can you tell us the truth here? What the hell happened, Andre? How could you have left? How could they have let you leave? You are such a credit to that broadcast, and they are missing you sorely.
Man, first of all, I appreciate that. And it was actually the Jared Anderson fight in Toledo, Ohio. I think that was a week or two before. But
my
everything else is accurate, though. And, listen, my contract was up, and they weren't going to renew, and we weren't able to come to terms on a new deal. And I sort of kind of knew that was coming, like more so from my personal life and conversations I've had with my mentor, my pastor and stuff. I just kind of knew that the season was shifting, but it wasn't confirmed yet. And then when we didn't renew with ESPN, it was confirmed. And I seem to have a knack with leaving that way, sort of abruptly. I don't know what that is about me, but so it's like a, retirement 2.0. And I struggle with it from that standpoint. And, for a couple of days prior to, I'm like, man, I'm doing it again. Here I am, going to leave again. Nobody knows. And I'm just out, like you just said. And I wasn't like happy or comfortable with that, but I'm at peace with the decision. And I miss my guys, man, Joe and Bernardo and Kriegel and Tim and my guy Mike McQuaid, the head guy over there, man. They've been just such a blessing to me, man. Those guys are awesome. I miss them. But seasons change, man. Maybe I'll come back at some point in time, but right now, it's a good time for me, Ariel, to exhale a little bit, because post-retirement, and I mean right after I retired, I hit the ground running. I started production for the documentary, was shooting the movie Creed, was working for HBO. Then I did hosted the Contender Show. Then I started working for ESPN. Then I'm working on the book. And it's important for me to have another mission, right? It's like a soldier. I've always had a mission, and then you snatch that away. It's tough to deal sometimes. So I needed to stay busy. But right now, I think it's time to take a step back, exhale, get the book in as many hands as possible, talk about it, but just kind of regroup for the top of the year.
Do you think you'll ever go back to TV?
It's possible, yeah. It just has to be the right situation. I would always love to come back to ESPN. I know that's always a home for me. And, but, I think it's important, too, to let people know, because some people are coming down on ESPN and they fired me. My contract was just up, and we just didn't come to terms and get it and renew the deal. That's all that was.
Okay.
But I sorely miss my guys. And I'm always going to have my hands in the game in some kind of respect. Boxing is my baby, and it's given me a life that I never thought I could have.
How do you feel about the current state of things from a business standpoint? Because we're just left with DAZN and ESPN here in America now. Showtime is gone at the end of the year. As you know, HBO gone for several years. And I feel like that's tough for the fighters, because when you don't have a lot of places where you can go shop around, there's not a lot of places to negotiate with and get the most amount of money. And so how do you feel about where we stand from a business standpoint going into 2024?
Not happy about it. Very concerned. I'm getting the HBO vibes all over again when they went out of business. It's sort of like shock and disbelief. And then, you sort of start getting sad about it. I grew up watching, Mike Tyson and Holyfield and those guys on Showtime, and then had my opportunity to fight on Showtime, and Stephen Espinoza and Nima. These guys have done a great job. I know they'll land on their feet. My biggest concern is not for the talent of the sport. We have the best talent in the world, and boxing is in great hands with the young crop that's coming up. But my question is it going to be on the proper platform? Not just a platform where you can watch it, but something that gives you big fight feels. And even if it's just a regular fight, get that fight feel. Like HBO used to have, the theme music, duh, 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 duh. Like, that's what I grew up watching. That gave me goosebumps. I could see myself walking to the ring, listening to that. That's the type of platform that we need, and I just hope we get it.
Yeah, I hope so as well. It's going to be a fascinating time. And even as we're speaking right now, there's this gigantic press conference going on in London. Have you heard about this? This Day of Reckoning press conference being put together by Saudi Arabia with all these big... It seems like the fans are saying, and my sentiment was, wow, this is great. This is a deep card. This is a UFC-esque card, but there's always a caveat. Why isn't Joshua fighting Wilder at the top? They're right there. They're both on the same card. Why aren't they fighting each other? How do you feel about this piece of news that is transpiring as we speak, the construction of this card, yet the two top dogs aren't fighting each other at the top?
Well, I think from what I'm hearing that they will, given that these two guys get through their next fight. It's an opportunity for both fighters to shake off some ring rust and sort of build the fight. That's a historical thing in the sport. Make a little money and then sort of build up for the fight with one another. Now I'm going to be disappointed if they don't fight, because I know Wilder wants it. I've heard Wilder speak out about it. Joshua's been quiet. So I love it. I think it's great. Saudi's been, putting a lot of big money behind boxing, and I love that. My thing is just get it on after these preliminary fights. That's when things start getting sticky, is when things are rumored to happen. There's no reason you guys should be on the same card if you guys aren't fighting next.
There are some people right.
That's where the indictment come in at that point.
Right. So there are some people who don't love how influential Saudi Arabia is in boxing. Why do you love it?
Well, I just like the fact that they're putting on boxing. I'm not going to get into anything political, but I appreciate what they just did, even with, the Ngannou and Tyson Fury fight. Like, some people will balk at that, but like, you got eyeballs watching that stuff. And I liked it. I liked the show. I like what they did, and I appreciate them, putting their money where their mouth is and giving guys an opportunity to fight in a different part of the world.
So what about our guy Francis? Were you shocked that he did that? Can we give him his flowers? No one thought that, right? Even you, one of the brightest minds in the history of the game, could not have foreseen that.
I didn't see that at all. I'm typically right on or somewhere in the ballpark. And I was at a gym and I didn't give him a shot. In the first 2 or 3 rounds, I'm looking at everybody. I'm like, Fury's going to carry him. He's going to give the people in Saudi their money's worth. And then he's going to step it up and finish him midway through the fight, 6, 7, somewhere around there. I go get on the Stairmaster. I'm doing my 20, 30 minutes, but I'm looking over and I'm like, I don't see anybody reacting. The fight's not over. So I yell over. I'm like, the fight's still going? And the look on their face, they said, oh, yeah, it's going. And Fury may be losing. I'm like, no, I get off the Stairmaster. Right after that, he gets dropped. I just couldn't believe it. And it was a legitimate knockdown.
Yeah.
Fury said he trained 12 weeks. I don't know what to make of it. But Ngannou, if that's the proper way to say his name,
yeah.
And I got to give him his credit, man. I mean, I got to give him his credit. He deserves every bit of what he's getting. I know he's going to have another big fight or two. He said he made more money in that fight than he did in his whole UFC career. That's what it's about, especially as you start getting older, And I cannot. I don't have the words. I don't know how that happened.
WBC just put him in their top 10. Do you agree with that?
Not necessarily. I know he just did what he did with Fury, but you got guys that have been laboring, man, to get in that top 10. But I'm going to call it what it is, though. It's like politics, bro. That's what it is with the sanctioning bodies. Mauricio, he gets all in an uproar when I talk about these things. He wants to message me on WhatsApp, and he needs to stop messaging me and just make sure he's doing the right things by the company. You don't get to pick and choose which guy gets in the rankings depending on who you know or what's going on in the back room. So Ngannou did a great job, but that's a one-off. Like, he has to establish himself. But they do whatever they want to do. And the problem that I have with that, if we weren't paying 3% to keep that company going, because you don't make money outside of what the fighters are paying you. You see, I start turning up a little bit when I start talking about these sanctioning bodies. If we weren't paying the 3%, some 2%, you do what you want to do. If you just want to have these rankings and you want to say, hey, we're over these rankings and it doesn't really affect the fight, that's your business. This stuff affects guys' livelihoods. Guys get phone calls saying, hey, man, we were getting close to a title shot. We're not going to get it now, man. They bumped you out of the top 10. And, man, hey, you went from being number 2 to number 5. How? I've been played around. My name's been messed around with the rankings and, given a title. And then now you're champion emeritus. And I just gave the belt back to the WBC at a certain point in time. So, listen, he did a great job in Ngannou. He shocked a lot of people. I did not see that coming. I think he needs to I like the conversations he's having about possibly a Wilder and possibly another top guy. Let's see if he can do it again. But what he's done so far, you got to give him credit for. But the sanctioning bodies, I have no respect for the way that they play with these rankings, play with guys' livelihoods, and play with guys' career. Man, it's shameful.
Do you think, obviously anything can happen on any given night, but him versus Joshua, him versus Wilder, the Dillian Whites, the Chisora, can he hang with all these guys in your opinion?
Styles make fights.
Yeah.
And we have to see. But after what he did with Fury, I'm not going to write him off anymore. It's a wait and see proposition for me at this point.
After what we just saw, it looks like Fury Usyk February 17th. Do you like Usyk now in that fight after what we just saw, or did you always like him in that fight?
I don't know. It's hard to know what to make of this fight because it's a good big man versus a good little man, and typically you go with the good big man. Usyk is going to be tricky for Fury because Fury's typically not facing a smaller guy like that. That being said, this last fight notwithstanding, you have to think that Fury's going to find a way to figure it out. I think it's going to be a great fight. I'm glad that Usyk is finally getting the fight. And but given Fury's last performance, whether he trained or not, the odds have definitely, leaned in Usyk's favor. And it's tight. It's tight on paper, and it's going to be tight in the fight. I don't think there's any landslide guy that you can say is going to win, but I think you got to lean toward Fury being who he is and doing what he's done the last few years to find a way to get this done.
Just a couple more for you, and then we'll let you go. Last time we spoke, I asked you about your guy, Nate Diaz. The fight happened. How would you assess what he did against Jake Paul?
I thought he did okay. I would have liked to have seen him let his hands go more. I think that's his strength. You know, Nate is not a defensive fighter. His offense is his defense. He overwhelms you with awkward volume. And that was the proper game plan for, you know, a guy like Jake Paul. You give Jake Paul time to think, he's going to set up that right hand. If he has nothing else, he's got a gifted right hand. He's got a natural right hand that has a mind of its own. So I think, you know, I would have liked to have seen Nate just be more offensive. That's him. When his engine is revving and he's letting shots go, people get caught up in how they look with Nate. I don't worry about that. My thing is just shoot the shot, just let it go, and then he'll be off balance, and then he'll punch himself back on balance. He just wasn't as offensive as I would have liked him to see, but tough as nails as always. I thought it was a great show, and I'm confused about what they're talking about because it sounded like there was some sort of rematch, if not verbally, contractually, about them getting in the octagon. Doesn't seem like Nate's interested. Maybe you could fill me in on that.
Yeah, there's some politics involved there, honestly, it's because Jake is involved with a promotion called the PFL, and I don't think Nate wants to go fight for them as well. And so I think if he wasn't associated with the PFL, there would be a better chance of this happening, which is, you know, somewhat unfortunate. But now we just found out that Jake, who's going to join us in about an hour, is fighting a young man named Andre August, and a lot of people were disappointed when they found out about this because he's just a fighter. He's just a guy. He's not an influencer or an MMA fighter. Do you like what Jake is doing here? That he's just going down the traditional path for a moment?
And I can't knock what he's doing. A lot of people have a lot to say about the young man, but I know the circle he runs in from a boxing standpoint, and I know the guys that he's around. He's around real boxing people. He's around real gyms. He's getting this, taking the shiners, and, you know, going through the process to try to be a good fighter. Now, will he ever become a world champion? Knowing how the sanctioning bodies are, they'll probably set that up if it's enough money involved. But I got to respect his process. And people say, oh, it's taken away from fighters. And I'm like, how? It's actually bringing eyeballs to the sport. It's bringing interest. It's cross-promotion going on from a whole different world that Jake comes from. And if he's done the work, which he has, to build up his fan base, and they follow him over to this sport, my thing to the fighters is step your game up. Don't get mad at Jake.
Well said. You're in Las Vegas for Shakur Stevenson's fight tomorrow. When your great publicist, Julie, told me that you were going to be in Las Vegas, Shakur, Vegas, ESPN, I was like, wait, is he back? Is he back with ESPN? No, she said, you're just there to support your guy. And so could I ask you about your relationship with Shakur? He's written and said some very nice things about you, and you vice versa as well. What is this relationship? How would you describe it?
I mean, that's my brother. You know, that's my brother. I'm happy to be out here just as a fan and a supporter and not having to work. You know, that feels good. I'm getting ready to head over to him right now for the weigh-ins as soon as I leave here. I've just seen him grow up since he's been, you know, a kid in the amateurs, and we've just continued to build our relationship just year after year. He's a man now. He's got a family, and he's a headliner. I come into my hotel room and he's on the magazine. And for me to see him just evolve and grow like that, and even knowing that he has a lot more room to grow, man, it just makes me happy. And I just want to see him reach the height that he's supposed to reach, make the money he's supposed to make, and then get out when it's time for him to get out.
Last one, December 9th, in your sort of neck of the woods, your stomping ground, San Francisco, Devin Haney coming back to the Bay for one of the biggest fights in that area since you were fighting. And of course, those were in Oakland, but this is pretty darn close. He's fighting Regis Prograis. Him and Shakur have been going back and forth. Do you think if both win their upcoming fights, we get that fight in 2024, or is it too tricky?
It's possible, but it's so many. The game is different now. The chessboard is different. It's not as simple as you guys being in or around the same weight class and wanting to fight. It's a lot of politics involved, and I don't mean necessarily from, you know, promoters, the fighters. They just move different. Guys take their time with certain fights, like you just mentioned. When they could take it, we'll get him in a year. There's just different politics that take place. If I can get $4 million to fight this guy, that's less of a risk, or $6 million to fight you and risk it all, I'll probably take the $4 million twice and then come see you on the third shot. So I don't know. It's tough to say, but to this point, Bill and Devin have made all the right moves, and Shakur is in his lane making all the right moves with his team. I hope we get it. I hope we get it while they're young. But, you know, I look at the Mayweather-Pacquiao situation, and some people say, oh, we got it 3-4 years too late. And my answer to that is, did we really? Floyd had concerns about some things with Manny, you know, with the blood testing and stuff like that. And I don't want to get into that because I don't know exactly what's true and what's not true. So they have some issues there. That's a real concern if you're Floyd. And the initial guarantee was 40 million, but when they actually fought, it was 100 million. So did it really come at the wrong time, or did it happen when it was supposed to happen? So it's tough to say, brother. I think we're gonna get it. I think, like I said before, boxing is in good hands with, you know, the Devin Haney, Shakur Stevenson, Jared Anderson, Javante Davis, those kind of guys. Boxing is in great hands, man. I got no worries.
Two massive takeaways from this conversation. Number one, I can't wait to sink my teeth into the book, Killing the Image. You can get it right now. And number two, man, do I miss you on TV. I miss you on TV, my man. I think I speak for all boxing fans, but happy you're in a great place, doing well and doing it your own way, as always. Thanks for the time. Good luck with the book, the sales, all that stuff and more. And, you know, with everything that you've got planned for 2024, I can't wait to see what you do next, Andre. Always a pleasure.
Well, thank you, brother. Appreciate it. Anytime.
All right, there he is, Andre Ward, the SOG himself. Thanks for watching. We appreciate it very much. Hey, if you like this video, give us the old thumbs up. Subscribe as well. You could get many more of these videos on the channel, so please do that. We would love you forever if you did so.